The elegant chandeliers of Le Ciel restaurant cast a warm glow over tables dressed in crisp white linens. Outside, rain tapped gently against tall windows that offered a stunning view of the city lights below. This wasn't just any dining establishment. It was where the city's most powerful people came to see and be seen. Among the sea of designer suits and sparkling jewelry moved a woman in a simple black uniform. Her brown hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes, tired but alert, missed nothing as she glided between tables. This was Lily, aged 28, who had worked at Le Ciel for 3 years now, and who knew exactly how each regular guest liked their drink served. "Would you care for another glass of the Bordeaux, sir?" she asked, her voice professional and pleasantly warm, as she addressed a silver-haired businessman who had just emptied his glass. He nodded without looking up from his conversation about offshore investments. Lily moved with practiced efficiency, pouring the deep red liquid with just the right angle to prevent dripping, then stepping back without disturbing the flow of conversation. Most nights at Le Ciel blended together in Lily's memory. The faces changed somewhat, but the routine remained the same. Take orders, deliver food, refill drinks, clear plates, and above all, remain nearly invisible while doing so. The wealthy diners rarely looked directly at her, their eyes often seeming to pass through her as if she were made of glass. Tonight was different, though. The restaurant had been closed for a private fundraiser benefiting the City Symphony Orchestra. The event had brought together not just the usual crowd of business executives and old money families, but also musicians, arts patrons, and local celebrities. The entire staff had been briefed extensively about the importance of flawless service. "Remember, this event could bring in major donors," the restaurant manager had told them during their pre-shift meeting. "The symphony needs this to be perfect, and so do we." Lily had just finished a double shift the day before. Her feet ached in her sensible black shoes as she moved across the polished marble floor. She had been scheduled to be off tonight, but another server had called in sick, and she couldn't afford to turn down the extra hours. 6 months of rent sat in an envelope under her mattress. 6 months of safety that she had been slowly building, penny by penny. Near the center of the room stood a magnificent grand piano, its black surface reflecting the chandelier light like a mirror. A thin man with round glasses and an expensive suit played softly, his fingers creating a pleasant backdrop to the murmur of conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against china. The notes floated through the room like silk ribbons, beautiful but ultimately just part of the atmosphere. Few people seemed to be actively listening. "Table 12 needs their appetizers," whispered Miguel, one of the other servers, as he passed by with an empty tray. Lily nodded and made her way to the kitchen, where chaos reigned despite the calm facade maintained in the dining room. "Order up for 12, called the head chef, sliding 3 plates of delicate scallops toward her. Lily balanced them expertly along her arm, adding a 4th plate before pushing through the swinging door back into the dining room. As she served the appetizers, she couldn't help but overhear the conversation at the table. 4 men in their 50s, all wearing watches that probably cost more than her yearly salary. "The symphony is on shaky financial ground," said one, cutting into a scallop. "They're desperate for new donors." "Well, they need to make classical music relevant again," replied another, not bothering to lower his voice. "My kids have no interest in it. They say it's boring and outdated. Maybe they should try adding some pop music to the program," suggested a third with a chuckle. "Get some teenagers in the door." Lily kept her face neutral as she finished placing the plates, but their words stung in an unexpected way. When she was younger, she had dreamed of being a musician. She had played piano since she was 5 years old, her talent nurtured by a grandmother who believed in her even when money was tight. For years, she had practiced for hours each day, her fingers dancing across second-hand keyboards in their small apartment while neighborhood kids played outside. She had even been accepted to the prestigious Riverside Music Conservatory with a partial scholarship, but halfway through her second year, her grandmother had suffered a stroke. Medical bills piled up, and Lily had withdrawn from school to care for the woman who had raised her. By the time her grandmother passed away a year later, the scholarship was long gone and substantial debt had taken its place. Now, at 28, music had become something Lily rarely thought about. The upright piano she had inherited from her grandmother sat in her tiny apartment, mostly used as a place to stack mail and laundry. She couldn't remember the last time she had played anything more complex than Happy birthday. Excuse me, said a woman's voice, pulling Lily from her thoughts. She turned to find a guest at table 9 holding up an empty wine glass. With a nod and a smile, Lily moved to assist, slipping back into her professional mode. The evening progressed smoothly. The fundraiser hit its stride as dinner was served, and the volume in the room increased with each round of drinks. The pianist continued to play, though his music was now almost completely drowned out by conversation. During a brief moment of downtime, Lily found herself standing near the kitchen doors, watching the room. The divide between those serving and those being served felt particularly stark tonight. On one side were people who worried about stock portfolios and vacation homes. On the other were people who worried about making rent and covering healthcare costs. "They're not even listening to him," murmured Raj, another server who had paused beside her. He nodded toward the pianist, who was now playing something that might have been Chopin, though it was hard to tell under the din of voices. "They're not here for the music," Lily replied quietly. "They're here to be seen supporting the music," Raj chuckled. "Profound. You should put that on a t-shirt." The pianist finished his piece and stood, announcing he would take a short break. Few people seemed to notice. As he walked toward the bar, Lily saw him flex his fingers and roll his shoulders, familiar movements that brought back memories of her own long practice sessions. "More champagne for the Winston party," called the beverage manager, and Lily hurried to collect a fresh bottle. As she moved through the crowd with her champagne bottle, she passed close to the piano. Without thinking, her free hand brushed lightly against the edge of the keyboard, a ghost of muscle memory making her fingers twitch slightly. The contact was brief, but it sent an unexpected jolt through her body, like touching something once beloved and long forgotten. "Don't even think about it," said a voice behind her. Lily turned to find the restaurant manager, Mr. Green, watching her with a knowing smile. He was one of the few people at Le Ciel who knew about her background. It had come up during her job interview when he asked about her education history. "I wasn't thinking anything," Lily said, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. "Sure you weren't," he replied with a wink. "Table 7 is waiting for that champagne." Lily nodded and continued on her way, but the brief moment had stirred something inside her. As she poured champagne and cleared plates, part of her mind kept drifting back to the piano. What would happen if she sat down and played? The thought was ridiculous, of course. She would lose her job immediately. Besides, it had been years. She doubted she could still play anything complex. The fundraiser reached its main event as the symphony director took to a small stage set up at one end of the dining room. He spoke about the importance of classical music in society and the symphony's upcoming season, which would feature several renowned guest soloists. "Music speaks to the soul in ways nothing else can," he said earnestly. "It transcends barriers of language and background. It connects us to our shared humanity." A few tables away from where Lily stood, a man in an expensive suit leaned toward his companion. "God, these artsy types are so dramatic," he said, loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "It's just music, not world peace." Several people laughed, and Lily felt something twist in her chest. The director continued his speech, either not hearing the comment or choosing to ignore it. After the speech came the direct appeal for donations. Pledge cards were distributed to all tables, and Lily noticed the wealthy guests writing down numbers with lots of zeros. The evening was clearly a success from a fundraising perspective, even if few people seemed genuinely moved by the mission. As dessert was being served, the pianist returned to the piano. He began to play something more upbeat, a medley of recognizable classical pieces arranged in a more modern style. It was clearly an attempt to recapture the room's attention, but few people seemed to notice. From table 5, a woman with a voice made sharp by too much champagne called out, "Can't you play something more lively? This is supposed to be a party." The pianist smiled tightly and transitioned into a jazzier piece. A few guests nodded approvingly, but most continued their conversations without pause. Lily found herself growing increasingly irritated as she watched the scene unfold. These people claimed to support the arts, yet they treated actual music as background noise, something to talk over rather than listen to. They dropped thousands on donations but couldn't spare 5 minutes of attention for a live performance. As she delivered coffee to table 12, she overheard the same men from earlier continuing their conversation. I bet none of these people could even tell the difference between Mozart and Beethoven. One said with a smirk. I doubt anyone in this room could do better than our pianist friend over there, said another, gesturing with his dessert fork. Though that's not saying much. They laughed and something shifted inside Lily. A memory surfaced, her grandmother's voice saying, "Music isn't just for fancy people, little one. It belongs to anyone willing to truly listen, and it especially belongs to those brave enough to make it." The pianist finished his set to scattered, distracted applause and announced he would take another break. As he walked away, Lily noticed him checking his watch, probably counting the minutes until he could leave. The piano sat empty now, gleaming under the chandeliers almost as if it were waiting for something to happen. Lily tried to focus on her work as the evening progressed, but her eyes kept drifting to the empty piano. The conversation she'd overheard from the businessman still echoed in her mind, stirring something that had been dormant for years. She moved mechanically between tables, topping up water glasses and clearing dessert plates, but her thoughts were elsewhere. "Earth to Lily," Miguel whispered as they passed each other near the kitchen. "You okay? You look like you're a million miles away." "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But it wasn't fatigue that made her hands tremble slightly as she poured coffee for an older couple who were actually thanking her. A rare occurrence at Le Ciel. It was something else. A feeling both familiar and foreign, like encountering an old friend who had changed beyond recognition. Back in the kitchen, she found herself humming softly as she arranged desserts on a tray. The tune was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the last piece she had mastered before leaving the conservatory. Her fingers twitched at her side, playing invisible keys. "You know that piece?" asked a voice behind her. Lily turned to find the pianist who had been performing all evening. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes and the slight slump in his shoulders. His name tag read Thomas. Yes, Lily admitted. "I studied it a long time ago." "Interesting," he said, looking at her with new curiosity. "Most servers I meet at these events couldn't tell Rachmaninoff from Rihanna." Lily smiled despite herself. "I went to Riverside Conservatory for a while." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "Riverside? That's a serious program. What happened?" "Life happened," Lily said simply, picking up her tray. "I should get back out there." As she pushed through the swinging door, she could feel Thomas watching her with interest. The weight of his gaze followed her back into the dining room, where the fundraiser was reaching its pinnacle. On a small stage at the front of the room, the symphony director was now announcing the total amount raised so far, a sum that made Lily's eyes widen. It was more money than she would see in 10 years of working at Le Ciel. The crowd applauded themselves enthusiastically. "And now," the director continued, "we'd like to offer our sincere thanks to everyone who made this evening possible, starting with our generous host, Mr. Reynolds, owner of Le Ciel." Mr. Reynolds, a tall man with perfectly coiffed gray hair, stepped onto the stage to accept the applause. Lily had only seen him a handful of times in her years working at the restaurant. He was rumored to own half a dozen other establishments across the city. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Mr. Reynolds said smoothly. "At Le Ciel, we believe that fine dining and fine arts go hand in hand. That's why we're proud to support the symphony and its mission to bring classical music to new audiences." Lily couldn't help but notice the irony. Most of the guests had barely listened to the music all evening. Even now, as Mr. Reynolds spoke about the importance of classical music, several tables were engaged in their own conversations. "Before we wrap up the formal portion of our evening," Mr. Reynolds continued, "I'd like to invite our talented pianist, Thomas, to play one final piece." Thomas made his way back to the piano amid polite applause. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands on the keys. But before he could begin playing, a loud voice cut through the room. "How about something we can actually enjoy this time?" called one of the businessmen from table 12, the same one who had been making snide comments all evening. "Maybe some Billy Joel?" Several people laughed. Thomas smiled stiffly and began to play a simplified version of Piano Man. The businessmen cheered. Lily felt her face growing hot as she watched Thomas, a classically trained musician, reduce himself to playing bar tunes for people who couldn't appreciate his talent. She set down her tray on an empty table, her hands clenched at her sides. Mr. Green, the restaurant manager, appeared at her elbow. "Lily, are you all right?" he asked quietly. This is wrong, she whispered, nodding toward the piano. He shouldn't have to. Mr. Green followed her gaze, his expression softening with understanding. Some people can't recognize quality when it's right in front of them, he said. Then, after a pause, you know, Thomas is leaving after this song. He mentioned needing a break. Lily looked at him sharply. What are you saying? I'm not saying anything, Mr. Green replied with a small smile. Just that there might be a few minutes when no one is at the piano. Before the event wraps up, he walked away, leaving Lily stunned. Was he suggesting what she thought he was? The very idea made her heart race. She hadn't touched a piano in years, not properly, not with intent. And to play here, in front of these people. Thomas finished Piano Man to enthusiastic applause, more than he'd received all night for his classical pieces. He stood, bowed slightly, and made his way toward the back of the room. As he passed Lily, he gave her a weary nod. Break a leg if you decide to step in, he murmured so softly she almost didn't hear him. They won't listen anyway. Lily watched him disappear through a side door. The piano sat empty now, gleaming under the chandeliers. The crowd had returned to their conversations. Glasses were being refilled, and no one seemed to notice that the music had stopped. Her feet moved before her mind had fully decided. Walking slowly as if in a dream, Lily made her way across the room toward the piano. A few servers watched her with wide eyes, and she saw Miguel make a cutting motion across his throat, a warning to stop whatever she was thinking of doing. But Lily kept walking. 6 years of silence, of buried dreams, of wondering what if propelled her forward. She reached the piano and stood beside it for a moment, her fingers brushing the polished wood. Mr. Green caught her eye from across the room. He gave her a slight nod, then deliberately turned away, pretending not to see what was happening. It was all the permission she needed. Taking a deep breath, Lily sat down on the bench. The keys stretched before her like old friends she hadn't seen in years. She placed her hands above them, noticing the contrast between her short, practical nails and the gleaming white ivory. No one had noticed her yet. The wealthy patrons continued their conversations, laughing and drinking, oblivious to the server who had stepped out of her role. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, letting her hands find their home position. Then, without further hesitation, she began to play. She chose the piece that had been on her mind all evening, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. The opening chords rang out deep and resonant, like distant bells calling across a valley. Her fingers remembered what her mind had forgotten, finding the notes with surprising certainty. For the first few measures, nothing changed in the room. The conversations continued, glasses clinked and laughter bubbled over the music. But then, as the melody developed and Lily's hands moved with increasing confidence across the keys, a change began to ripple through the crowd. At a nearby table, a woman paused mid-sentence, her wine glass halfway to her lips, as she turned to look at the piano. Behind her, a man in a dark suit stopped speaking to his companion and tilted his head, listening. Gradually, like a wave spreading outward, more and more people fell silent and turned toward the source of the music. Lily didn't notice. Her eyes were closed now, her body swaying slightly as she leaned into the music. The years of not playing seemed to melt away with each measure. Her fingers found strength and dexterity she didn't know she still possessed. The melody soared and dipped, telling its story of longing and triumph. By the time she reached the famous middle section of the first movement, the entire room had fallen silent. Every conversation had stopped. Every glass had been set down. Every eye was fixed on the woman in the server's uniform who was playing with the skill and passion of a concert pianist. The businessmen at table 12 sat frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and embarrassment. One of them, the loudest critic from earlier, had his mouth slightly open, his expression one of complete disbelief. Lily played on, unaware of the transformation happening around her. The music flowed through her like electricity, reawakening parts of herself she had thought were gone forever. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. When you play with your whole heart, little one, you speak directly to the hearts of others. No words needed. As the piece built toward its climax, Lily's playing became even more intense. Her fingers flew across the keys with remarkable precision, drawing sounds from the instrument that Thomas hadn't approached all evening. The difficult runs and arpeggios that had once taken her months to master now seemed to play themselves. muscle memory taking over where conscious thought couldn't follow. The final chords of the first movement resonated through the silent room. Only when the last note had faded did Lily open her eyes, suddenly aware of the complete absence of other sounds. She looked up to find every person in the restaurant staring at her. For one terrible moment, she thought she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Her heart pounded in her chest and heat rushed to her face. She started to rise, an apology already forming on her lips. Then Mr. Reynolds, the owner himself, stood up from his table. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Slowly, deliberately, he began to applaud. Like a dam breaking, the rest of the room erupted. People rose to their feet, applauding wildly. Some were calling out praise, others simply staring in amazement. The symphony director had his phone out recording. Even the kitchen staff had emerged to witness what was happening, standing in a line by the swinging doors with expressions of amazed pride. Lily sat frozen on the bench, overwhelmed by the response. This wasn't the polite, distracted applause that Thomas had received. This was something else entirely, a genuine, spontaneous recognition of something extraordinary. The businessman who had mocked the music earlier was now clapping harder than anyone, his face flushed with what might have been embarrassment or genuine emotion. It was impossible to tell. Mr. Green appeared at Lily's side, beaming with pride. "I always knew you had it in you," he said softly, just for her ears. "What happens next is up to you." Lily looked out at the crowd, still on their feet, still applauding. For the first time in years, she felt fully alive, fully herself. The path ahead was suddenly full of possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine since leaving the conservatory. "I think," she said, her voice barely audible over the applause, "I'd like to play the second movement." The room remained completely silent as Lily positioned her hands once again over the keys. The second movement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, Tone 2, began with a gentler touch than the first, a delicate conversation between melody and harmony that required both technical precision and emotional depth. Lily took a deep breath and began to play. The opening notes floated through the air like a question. Unlike the thunderous power of the first movement, this section was intimate, almost like a confession. Lily's fingers moved with newfound confidence, each note ringing clear and true in the hushed room. From her position at the piano, she could see the faces of the guests, the same people who had barely acknowledged her existence all evening. Now they watched her with expressions ranging from shock to wonder. The businessman who had been so dismissive earlier sat with his mouth slightly open, his drink forgotten in his hand. As the music built, Lily felt something inside her changing. Years of pushing down her passion, of telling herself that dreams were luxuries she couldn't afford, began to dissolve with each measure. Here, in this unexpected moment, she was reconnecting with the core of who she had always been. The symphony director had moved closer to the piano, watching her hands with professional interest. When Lily reached a particularly difficult passage and navigated it flawlessly, his eyebrows rose, and he exchanged a meaningful glance with a colleague. Near the back of the room, Lily spotted her fellow servers watching with expressions of stunned pride. Miguel gave her a discreet thumbs up. Mr. Green stood beside them, arms crossed, a satisfied smile on his face as though he'd known all along what would happen. The second movement flowed into its middle section, where the melody became more insistent, more questioning. Lily leaned into the emotional current of the piece, letting the music tell its story through her. She wasn't just playing notes on a page. She was channeling something deeper. A woman in an evening gown near the front dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Beside her, an older gentleman nodded slowly in recognition of what he was witnessing. Not just technical skill, but authentic artistry. As Lily approached the final moments of the second movement, she realized that her cheeks were wet with tears. She hadn't cried in years, not since her grandmother's funeral. Yet here, amid strangers in designer clothes, she found herself weeping freely, the music drawing emotions from places she had locked away. The final notes of the second movement faded into silence. Lily kept her hands hovering over the keys for a moment, reluctant to break the spell. When she finally looked up, she was startled to see that several guests had tears in their eyes as well. The applause began slowly this time, not with the shocked explosion of before, but with a deep appreciation that built gradually until the room was filled with it. People weren't just clapping. They were standing again, some calling out "brava" and "magnificent." A few were shaking their heads in disbelief. Lily's hands trembled as she lowered them to her lap. The adrenaline that had carried her through the first two movements was starting to fade, leaving her feeling simultaneously drained and electrified. The symphony director approached the piano, extending his hand. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying in the now quiet room. "I don't believe I caught your name." "Lily," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lily Chen." "Well, Ms. Chen," he said, "I think I speak for everyone when I say we would be honored to hear the third movement as well." A murmur of enthusiastic agreement swept through the crowd. Lily glanced around, momentarily overwhelmed by the attention. Her gaze landed on Mr. Green, who gave her an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, she turned back to the piano. The third movement was the most technically demanding of all, a test of endurance as much as skill after the emotional intensity of the first two sections. Could she still do it? It had been so long. As if reading her thoughts, an older woman at a nearby table called out, "You can do it, dear. We're all with you." Something about the simple encouragement from a complete stranger gave Lily the push she needed. She positioned her hands and launched into the third movement with renewed determination. From the first notes, this section was different, playful and light after the emotional depths of the second movement. Lily's fingers danced across the keys with surprising agility, finding rhythms and patterns that she hadn't played in years yet somehow remembered. The room seemed to breathe with her as she played, the audience collectively leaning forward during complex passages and relaxing during moments of resolution. These people who had talked over Thomas's playing all evening now hung on every note. As the movement progressed toward its famous climax, Lily felt a strange sense of liberation. Whatever happened after tonight, whether she returned to serving tables tomorrow or not, something fundamental had changed. She had reclaimed a part of herself that had been dormant for too long. The final minutes of the concerto built to a triumphant conclusion. Lily's hands moved with increasing speed and confidence, drawing sounds from the piano that filled every corner of the restaurant. The technical challenges that had once seemed insurmountable now flowed naturally from her fingers. When she struck the final chords, bold, declarative statements that seemed to say, "I am here," the sound resonated through the room and through her body. For a moment after the last note, there was perfect silence. Then the room erupted. The applause was thunderous. Not polite gallery applause, but the kind of genuine, enthusiastic response usually reserved for concert halls. People were on their feet, some calling out praise, others simply clapping with shocked expressions. Someone whistled loudly from the back of the room, probably Miguel. The businessman who had been so dismissive earlier was now applauding vigorously, a look of genuine humility on his face. When he caught Lily's eye, he gave her a respectful nod that felt like an apology. Mr. Reynolds, the restaurant owner, approached the piano with purpose. The crowd quieted as he reached Lily's side. "Ms. Chen," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "I believe I speak for everyone here when I say that was one of the most remarkable performances I've ever witnessed." He turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we've all been reminded tonight of an important truth, that extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected places." The room applauded again. Lily felt her face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "If I may ask," Mr. Reynolds continued when the applause subsided, "where did you study?" "Your technique is exceptional." "I attended Riverside Conservatory," Lily replied, her voice steadier now. "For almost 2 years." "Only 2 years?" The symphony director had joined them by the piano. "And may I ask why you left?" The room fell silent, waiting for her answer. Lily hesitated, looking out at the sea of curious faces. The same people who had looked through her all evening, now hanging on her every word. "My grandmother got sick," she said simply. "She raised me and she needed care. There were medical bills. I had to choose." A murmur of sympathy moved through the crowd. The symphony director and Mr. Reynolds exchanged glances. "And you've been working here ever since?" Mr. Reynolds asked. Lily nodded. "For 3 years now. Playing all this time?" "No," she admitted. "Not really. Not like this. The piano at my apartment. I mostly use it to stack mail." A woman near the front made a small sound of distress at this revelation, as though the idea of such talent going unused was physically painful to her. "Well," said the symphony director, "I think that's a situation we might be able to remedy." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, which he handed to Lily. "I'd very much like to continue this conversation tomorrow, perhaps at my office. Say 10 o'clock? Lily took the card with trembling fingers, reading the embossed letters. Dr. Anton Novak, Artistic Director, City Symphony Orchestra. Yeah, she managed to say. "Thank you." "Wonderful." Dr. Novak turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we've all been privileged to witness something special tonight. This is why we support the arts, because music has the power to transform, to reveal, to connect us to our shared humanity." The guests applauded again, many nodding in agreement, including some who had been dismissive of the artsy types earlier in the evening. As the applause continued, a well-dressed older woman approached the piano. She was elegant in a simple black dress with silver hair and an air of quiet authority that made people step aside to let her pass. "Ms. Chen," she said when she reached Lily, "my name is Eleanor Wright. I sit on the board of the Riverside Conservatory." She handed Lily another business card. "I would be very interested in discussing your potential return to complete your education. With a full scholarship, of course." Lily stared at the card in disbelief. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Miguel called from where the servers were gathered, then looked embarrassed when everyone turned to look at him. A ripple of laughter moved through the room, breaking the intensity of the moment. Eleanor Wright smiled. "Take some time to think about it," she said gently. "Call me when you're ready to discuss the details." As Eleanor moved away, other guests began to approach the piano. A man introduced himself as a recording engineer. A woman mentioned a private concert series she hosted. Someone else talked about an arts foundation that supported emerging musicians. Lily sat at the piano bench, overwhelmed by the sudden rush of opportunities appearing before her. Just hours ago, she had been invisible to these people, just another server in a black uniform. Now they looked at her with respect, with interest, with recognition. Mr. Green appeared at her side, gently touching her elbow. "I think you might need a moment," he said quietly. "Should I clear a path to the break room?" Lily nodded gratefully. As she stood from the piano bench, the room broke into applause once more. She ducked her head, suddenly shy again, and followed Mr. Green toward the kitchen doors. Behind her, she heard Dr. Novak addressing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we've just been given a powerful reminder of why our fundraising work is so vital. Talent like Ms. Chen should never be lost due to financial constraints." The kitchen doors swung shut behind her, cutting off his words. In the relative quiet of the staff area, Lily leaned against a wall and took her first full breath in what felt like hours. "So," said Miguel, who had followed them in, "I guess you won't be helping me with the breakfast shift tomorrow." The break room felt strangely small after the grandeur of the main dining area. Lily sat on a folding chair, staring at the 2 business cards in her hands while trying to process everything that had just happened. Her fingers still tingled from playing, a familiar sensation she hadn't felt in years. "Drink this," Mr. Green said, handing her a glass of water. "You look like you might faint." "I'm not going to faint," Lily replied, but she took the water gratefully. Her throat was dry and her heart was still racing. "I just can't believe what just happened out there." "I can," Mr. Green said simply. He sat down across from her. "I heard you humming Chopin while mopping the floor your first week here. I've been wondering when you'd find your way back to the piano." Miguel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, grinning from ear to ear. The look on that businessman's face, the one who was being a jerk all night, priceless. "I wish I had a picture." Lily smiled despite herself. "I didn't do it to show him up." "I know," Miguel said. "That's what makes it even better. You weren't trying to prove anything to anyone. You were just playing, being yourself." The kitchen doors swung open and Raj stuck his head in. "Lily, there are like 20 people out here asking for you, including Dr. Novak and Mr. Reynolds. What should I tell them?" Lily looked to Mr. Green, suddenly unsure. Her manager smiled encouragingly. "Tell them Ms. Chen will be out shortly," he said. "She's just taking a moment to collect herself." Raj nodded and disappeared back through the doors. "Ms. Chen," Miguel mimicked in a pompous voice. Listen to you getting all formal all of a sudden. Stop it, Lily said, but she was laughing now. The absurdity of the situation was starting to hit her. Just hours ago, she had been worried about paying her electricity bill. Now the director of the city symphony was waiting to speak with her. What are you going to do? Mr. Green asked, his tone more serious. Lily looked down at the business cards again. Dr. Anton Novak, City Symphony Orchestra. Eleanor Wright, Riverside Conservatory Board of Trustees. 2 pathways back to the life she had abandoned 6 years ago. I don't know, she admitted. It all feels so sudden. Like I'm dreaming. Well, while you're dreaming, can I have your shifts next week? Miguel joked, then raised his hands in surrender when both Lily and Mr. Green shot him looks. Kidding. Lily stood up, smoothing her black uniform. I should go back out there. It's rude to keep them waiting. One moment, Mr. Green said. He reached into a locker and pulled out a clean white apron. Here, at least let's freshen up your appearance a bit. Lily took the apron gratefully and tied it around her waist, then used her phone camera to check her reflection. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with lingering excitement. She looked different somehow, more alive than she had in years. Ready? Mr. Green asked. Lily took a deep breath and nodded. As they pushed through the doors back into the main restaurant, she was surprised to find that many of the guests had already left. It was, after all, nearly midnight, but a small group remained, gathered near the piano, speaking in hushed voices that fell silent when they spotted her. Dr. Novak approached her first, extending his hand. Ms. Chen, thank you for joining us again. I'm sorry to have kept you waiting, Lily said, suddenly conscious of her uniform, of the fact that she had been serving these people their dinner just hours ago. Not at all, Dr. Novak said warmly. We've been having a rather interesting discussion about you, actually. He gestured to the small group. Several of our patrons are quite taken with your talent. The businessman who had been so dismissive earlier stepped forward, looking slightly uncomfortable. Ms. Chen, I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was inexcusable. Lily was taken aback. It's all right. No, it's not, he interrupted. I was arrogant and rude, and you showed remarkable grace under the circumstances. He extended his hand. I'm David Harrison. I run Harrison Media Group. Lily shook his hand, still unsure how to respond to this sudden shift in dynamics. Mr. Harrison has an interesting proposition for you, Dr. Novak said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Harrison cleared his throat. Yes, well, our company produces a documentary series called Hidden Talents. We showcase extraordinary individuals with unexpected abilities. He paused, looking at Lily intently. Your story, a classically trained pianist working as a server to support her family, then stunning everyone with a world-class performance. It's exactly the kind of narrative our viewers connect with. Lily blinked. You want to make a documentary about me? A segment, yes. Fully compensated, of course. Harrison handed her a business card, her third of the evening. Take some time to consider it. No pressure. Before Lily could respond, Eleanor Wright joined them. I hope you've had a chance to think about my offer, she said. Riverside would be honored to have you return. I haven't had much time to think about anything, Lily admitted. Of course, Eleanor said. It's been an eventful evening. But the offer stands. A full scholarship to complete your education, with additional stipends for living expenses. We don't want financial concerns to stand in your way again. Dr. Novak nodded approvingly. And while you're studying, we might discuss some guest performances with the symphony. Nothing too demanding. We understand you'll need to focus on your education, but it would be a shame to keep your talent hidden from the public. Lily felt overwhelmed by the flood of opportunities suddenly being presented to her. For years, she had existed in survival mode, working double shifts and pinching pennies. Now these people were talking about scholarships, performances, documentaries. This is all very generous, she said carefully, but I need some time to process everything. Of course, Dr. Novak said. My office tomorrow at 10 as we discussed? We can talk through the details then. Lily nodded, grateful for the structure of a concrete plan in the midst of so much uncertainty. Mr. Reynolds, who had been listening to the exchange, stepped forward. Ms. Chen, regardless of what you decide about these other opportunities, I want you to know that your position here at Le Ciel is secure. In fact, I'd like to discuss the Possibility of regular piano performances if you're interested. Our patrons would be delighted. Lily couldn't help but smile at the irony. After years of being practically invisible to the restaurant owner, she was now being offered a featured position. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I appreciate that. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes with various guests approaching to express their admiration and, in some cases, offer additional opportunities, teaching positions, private concert engagements, even a recording session. Lily received each suggestion with polite thanks, tucking away business cards and promises to follow up. By the time the last guests finally departed, it was well past midnight. The restaurant staff, who would normally be cleaning up and preparing to go home, had been watching the proceedings with interest. Now they surrounded Lily with questions and congratulations. Did that guy really offer you a TV spot? Asked one of the newer servers, her eyes wide. Not exactly TV, Lily explained. A documentary series. I think it streams online. Still, the server said, That's huge. Miguel placed a protective arm around Lily's shoulders. All right, everyone, let the superstar breathe. She's had a big night. Mr. Green nodded in agreement. The rest of you finish closing up. I'll walk Lily out. As the staff dispersed, Mr. Green guided Lily toward the back exit. The night air was cool against her flushed skin as they stepped outside. You okay to get home? He asked, concerned. I can call you a taxi. I'm fine, Lily assured him. The bus stop is just around the corner. I take it every night. Mr. Green looked like he wanted to protest but nodded instead. Things are going to change for you, Lily. After tonight, nothing will be the same. I know, she said quietly. The realization was just beginning to sink in. For so long she had been stuck in a holding pattern, just trying to make ends meet. Now suddenly doors were opening all around her. Are you scared? He asked perceptively. Lily considered the question. Yes, she admitted, but not in a bad way. It's more like, I'd forgotten what it feels like to hope for something more, to have options. Mr. Green smiled. Well, get some rest. You've got a big day tomorrow. 10 o'clock with Dr. Novak, right? Lily nodded. I don't even know what to wear. I don't exactly have clothes for a meeting at the symphony. Just be yourself, Mr. Green advised. That's what impressed them tonight. Not your uniform, but what was underneath it. The real you. Lily impulsively hugged him, catching both of them by surprise. Thank you, she said, for pushing me tonight, for seeing something in me I couldn't see anymore. Mr. Green patted her back awkwardly. You did all the hard work. I just created an opportunity. They said their goodbyes and Lily walked toward the bus stop, her mind whirling with possibilities. The weight of the business cards in her pocket seemed to represent the diverging paths now open to her. Education, performance, media. All things she had long ago filed away in a mental drawer labeled impossible dreams. The bus was nearly empty at this late hour. Lily sat by the window, watching the city lights blur past. In her reflection in the dark glass, she could see a different person than the one who had ridden this same bus to work that morning. Someone with a future that extended beyond the next shift, the next paycheck. As the bus approached her stop, Lily felt a sudden surge of energy. When she reached her apartment, instead of falling into bed exhausted as she usually did after a long shift, she went straight to the upright piano in the corner of her living room. She removed the stack of mail, the laundry basket, and the random items that had accumulated on its closed lid. The piano was badly out of tune from years of neglect, but when Lily sat down and placed her fingers on the keys, it didn't matter. She began to play, not Rachmaninoff this time, but a simple melody her grandmother had taught her when she was just 5 years old. Music finds a way, her grandmother had always said. If it's truly in your heart, it always finds a way out. As the gentle notes filled her small apartment, Lily felt tears running down her cheeks again. Not tears of sadness or even joy, but of recognition, of coming home to herself after a very long absence. Tomorrow would bring meetings and decisions and new beginnings. But tonight, in the quiet hours after midnight, there was just Lily and the piano, rediscovering each other note by note. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. Lily stood in the wings of the city's grand concert hall, wearing a floor-length blue gown that shimmered under the stage lights. Her hands, once chapped from carrying trays and washing dishes, were now well moisturized and manicured, the hands of a professional pianist. 5 minutes, Ms. Chen, the stage manager whispered, checking something off on his clipboard. Lily nodded, her stomach fluttering with familiar pre-performance nerves. No matter how many times she did this now, the moments before walking on stage always brought the same mixture of excitement and anxiety. "You've got this," came a voice behind her. Lily turned to see Mr. Green, looking slightly uncomfortable in a suit and tie. "The whole restaurant crew is out there. Miguel made us all wear matching shirts with your face on them." "He didn't," Lily gasped, half horrified, half amused. Mr. Green laughed. "No, but I thought the idea might distract you from being nervous." Lily smiled gratefully. In the whirlwind month since that fateful night at Le Ciel, Mr. Green had become something of a mentor, helping her navigate the sudden transition from server to celebrated pianist. "Dr. Novak says the place is packed," he continued. Not a single empty seat. That didn't surprise Lily. The story of the waitress who stunned an elite crowd with her hidden musical talent had spread rapidly, first through social media videos taken by guests that night, then through Harrison's documentary segment, which had gone viral within days of its release. The documentary had captured everything: her performance at the restaurant, interviews with astonished guests, her reunion with the piano at her apartment, and the gradual unfolding of her new life. People seemed captivated not just by her talent, but by her story, the sacrifice she'd made for her grandmother, the years spent burying her dreams, and now her second chance. 2 minutes, the stage manager announced. Lily took a deep breath, thinking back over the past 6 months. After meeting with Dr. Novak the morning after her impromptu performance, things had moved with dizzying speed. The symphony had offered her a guest soloist position, while Eleanor Wright had arranged for her immediate re-enrollment at Riverside Conservatory. Balancing both opportunities had been challenging but necessary. Lily wanted the formal completion of her education, but she also couldn't pass up the chance to perform. A compromise had been reached: part-time studies, with special accommodations for her performance schedule. Mr. Reynolds had been true to his word as well, creating a special position for her at Le Ciel, not as a server anymore, but as the restaurant's resident pianist for special events. The salary was 3 times what she'd made before, for fewer hours and far more enjoyable work. 1 minute, the stage manager said. Lily closed her eyes, centering herself. Tonight was different from all her previous performances over the past months. Tonight was her official debut with the City Symphony as a featured soloist, playing the very piece that had changed her life, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, Ms. Chen. "It's time," the stage manager said gently. Lily opened her eyes and nodded. Mr. Green gave her shoulder a supportive squeeze. "Break a leg," he whispered. "Though preferably not literally. Workers' comp doesn't cover this sort of thing." Lily laughed, grateful for the moment of levity. Then, squaring her shoulders, she stepped out onto the stage. The applause that greeted her was thunderous. The concert hall was indeed packed, every seat filled with people who had come to witness her official debut. In the front row, Lily spotted Miguel and the other servers from Le Ciel, all dressed in their finest clothes, clapping wildly. Beside them sat Eleanor Wright, looking pleased and proud. Further back, Lily recognized David Harrison, whose documentary had helped bring her story to a wider audience. He gave her a respectful nod as their eyes met briefly. As Lily made her way to the gleaming grand piano at center stage, she caught sight of a small elderly woman in the 3rd row. Mrs. Patel, her neighbor, who had been watering the plants in Lily's apartment these past months while she traveled for performances. The older woman beamed and gave a small wave. Reaching the piano, Lily took a moment to adjust the bench, then sat down. The hall fell silent with anticipation. At the conductor's podium, Dr. Novak met her eyes, waiting for her signal that she was ready. Lily placed her fingers on the keys and gave a slight nod. Dr. Novak raised his baton, and the orchestra began the dark, suspenseful introduction to Rachmaninoff's masterpiece. As she waited for her entrance, Lily found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The years of financial struggle, the nights of exhaustion after double shifts, the gradual fading of her musical dreams. All of it had seemed so permanent, so unchangeable. Yet here she was, about to play with a professional orchestra on one of the city's most prestigious stages. Her entrance approached. Lily took a deep breath and joined the orchestra, her fingers striking the powerful opening chords that she had played at Le Ciel half a year ago. The sound filled the concert hall, resonant and full in a way that the restaurant piano could never have managed. This time, there were no conversations to overcome, no clinking glasses or distracted patrons. Every person in the hall was focused entirely on the music, on her. As Lily played, she felt a connection with the audience that transcended words, the pure communication that only music could achieve. The first movement built to its dramatic climax, Lily's hands moving with confidence born of hundreds of hours of recent practice. When the movement ended, the audience remained silent, completely absorbed in the performance. During the lyrical second movement, Lily allowed herself a moment to look out at the faces watching her. She spotted the businessman, David Harrison, who had been so dismissive that night at Le Ciel, now leaning forward in his seat, completely engrossed. She saw Mr. Reynolds, who had created a special position for her at the restaurant, nodding approvingly. By the time she reached the third movement, Lily was no longer thinking about the audience or her journey. She was simply living in the music, letting it flow through her with all the emotion and technical precision she could summon. The final moments of the concerto approached, the triumphant conclusion that had stunned the restaurant. Crowd into silence before their explosive applause. Lily's fingers flew across the keys, drawing every ounce of passion from the instrument. The orchestra swelled behind her, the combined sound filling every corner of the hall. With the final resounding chords, Lily completed her journey with this piece. As the last notes faded, there was a moment of perfect stillness, the audience collectively holding their breath. Then came the applause, a wave of sound almost as powerful as the music itself. People rose to their feet, applauding with genuine appreciation and excitement. Lily stood from the piano bench and bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the response. Dr. Novak extended his hand, inviting her to the front of the stage for another bow. As they stood together, acknowledging the orchestra, the applause continued unabated. Flowers appeared, bouquets being passed up to the stage from audience members. Miguel and the other servers were on their feet, cheering loudly enough to be heard over the general applause. Mrs. Patel was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. After several curtain calls, Lily finally made her way backstage, arms full of flowers, ears ringing with applause that still hadn't died down. She found a quiet corner and sat down, suddenly exhausted and exhilarated all at once. A small knock on the door frame made her look up. Eleanor Wright stood there smiling warmly. "Magnificent, my dear," she said. "Absolutely magnificent." "Thank you," Lily replied, still catching her breath. It felt right, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "You were," Eleanor said simply. "And I have news that might interest you. The dean at Riverside has reviewed your progress this semester, and considering your professional accomplishments, has approved an accelerated path to completion. You could have your degree by next spring." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? That's a year ahead of schedule." "Well, we don't often have students who are already performing professionally at your level," Eleanor explained. "Your practical experience counts for quite a bit." Before Lily could respond, there was another knock. David Harrison appeared, looking genuinely impressed. "Ms. Chen, remarkable performance," he said. "The documentary follow-up is getting excellent feedback from early screeners. People are inspired by your story." "I'm glad," Lily said sincerely. "If it helps even one person dust off their own forgotten dreams, it's worth it." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly what's happening. We've received hundreds of messages from viewers who say your story motivated them to revisit abandoned passions, not just in music, but art, writing, dance, all sorts of creative pursuits." More visitors arrived: Dr. Novak, Mr. Reynolds, fellow musicians, critics, all wanting to congratulate her on the performance. Lily received them graciously, but found herself increasingly eager for some quiet. When she finally managed to slip away, she found Mr. Green waiting near the stage door with her coat. "Ready to escape?" he asked knowingly. "More than ready," Lily admitted. They made their way through a back exit, avoiding the crowds at the main entrance. Outside, the night air was crisp and refreshing after the warmth of the concert hall. "So," Mr. Green said as they walked, "how does it feel? 6 months ago you were serving drinks to these people. Tonight they gave you a standing ovation." Lily considered the question seriously.
Honestly?
"Part of me is still that waitress. I still wake up some mornings and reach for my server uniform before remembering. And the other part? The other part feels like I've finally come home," Lily said softly. "Not to a place, but to myself, to who I was always meant to be." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Mr. Green spoke again. "You know, we've kept your old locker at Le Ciel, just in case this whole concert pianist thing doesn't work out." Lily laughed. "I appreciate the backup plan, but I think I'm where I need to be now." "I know," he said. "But the staff would love to see you sometime. Maybe stop by for dinner next week. As a guest, of course." "I'd like that," Lily said. "And maybe afterward I could play something. For old times' sake." They reached the corner where their paths would diverge, Mr. Green to his car, Lily to the apartment she would soon be leaving for a place closer to the conservatory. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Lily said, pausing at the intersection. "All the other people out there like me. Working jobs, just getting by with some amazing talent or passion buried inside them. Maybe your story will help them find their way," Mr. Green suggested. "I hope so," Lily said. She looked up at the city lights, thinking of all the restaurants and offices and shops filled with people who might be one brave moment away from changing their lives completely. "Good night, Mr. Green," she said finally. "And thank you for everything." "Good night, Ms. Chen," he replied with a smile. "Or should I say maestro?" Lily laughed and shook her head. As she walked away, her steps were light despite her exhaustion. The journey that had begun with a spontaneous decision to approach an empty piano had led her here, not just to a successful career, but to a rediscovery of her true self, and that, she realized, was the most valuable thing of all.